Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
We've been doing this 5.5 years. We're the biggest Red Wings podcast on the planet. And we still, at a time in our lives where the world is shut down, cannot communicate properly as to when to start an episode. When we're all in the same damn group chat. It came down to a point where I didn't even respond to Evan. I just linked him to Sylvan Learning Centers.
I thought you were linking Brad, to be honest.
No, I wasn't. I was talking to Brad because we were both in the room, not the virtual room, ready to record the episode.
If I have to read anything, I'm out.
So, yes, so we've noticed. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Warm, no long paragraphs, get to the point.
Yeah, Evan's like, I work till 4:30. I have a meeting till 4:30. Then I'm eating. Then we can rock. So I'm thinking mentally in my head, yeah, okay, 5:30 if he eats slow. So then he updates us in the chat at 5 o'clock. I'm eating. I'm like, okay, perfect. So he started a little late. So we'll be ready to rock at 5:30. So me and Ryan are talking. Evan doesn't respond in the chat, or he says something like, I'm free the rest of the night. So we're like, okay, let's go now.
He said, and I quote, I'm good whenever.
And
I don't think that's what I said.
That's what you said.
We'll post screenshots. So me and Ryan pop into the chat here, and we're just sitting. So is he coming? And then I added him in the chat, and he's like, I'm nowhere near done dinner. And I'm like, what the hell is happening?
Yes, I've taken my time.
He goes, I had a meeting. We're like, yeah, we got past that. You told us you were eating now.
Yeah, I was still cooking, waiting for my sweet potatoes to come out of the oven. It was a long time. Takes time.
You screwed yourself now, Evan, because we are now in the evening where the sun is shining directly into your eyes. And someone in the YouTube comments on last episode astutely noticed that you tried to turn your webcam, and they said, Evan, that doesn't change the angle at which the sun hits the earth. Hate to break it to you.
Well, no, I can tilt my monitor, and then I can sit more over here.
Wait. Yeah.
I might just lay down. You see that blanket behind me? I might just... you can't stop me now. I could go lay down. Let's see how far this stretches.
You guys need to know that I intentionally... We have...
He's actually going for it.
He's laying down.
This is immediately one of those
Good night.
episodes you have to watch on YouTube. He's gone.
He's gone. He's out of frame.
Still here, don't worry.
Oh my, it's actually eerie hearing him so perfectly. Oh shit. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. We have long since lost it. I'm
night.
Ryan Hanna.
I am.
In case you're not watching on YouTube, Brad's name is also Elon Musk's new child's name. And we have the room which formerly housed the conscious Evan Lobsinger. I know some of you guys don't like long lead-ins, and I'm sorry for the rambling. I promise we'll get away from it. Oh, he lives.
Back. He's back.
I intentionally cover up the only comfy armchair in the podcast studio with crap every day, because I know if Evan is tempted, he will go sit in that thing, and I can't stop him. I can't. He's much bigger than me. And he's much funnier than me, and so there's I have no leverage over him, so I just cover it in garbage because I know he'll be too lazy to move it. But now that he figured out he can pull his mic out of the stand, which is what you're hearing,
It's fantastic.
yeah, well, it's changed the whole dynamic of the show. Well,
I may not have somewhere comfortable to lay because this is a cement floor, but now I have a super deker 10 feet from me, so if I get disinterested in the conversation, I can just go fire off a couple rounds and then get back in.
I think you've already done that before, Brad.
I decided against a super deker because I was like, there's other things I would rather spend $300 on, and then watching the video of you using it today, I was like,
I've had this thing for 5 hours, and it's the best investment I've ever made.
I asked Mel, I was like, I need you to tell me why I don't need this thing to practice a sport that I no longer play competitively. And her first thought after watching your video, Brad, or her first words were, well, how much does it cost? I went, God, no, Mel, Jesus.
That's irrelevant.
I guarantee within a month I'll end up having one.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be back at work soon. Just come in, get the discount, and you're happy.
No. I'm not catching your coronavirus voluntarily.
Fine, I will pick it up for you, and you can e-transfer the money, you a-hole.
Thank you. I'll give you a 69-cent tip.
Nice.
This episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is a less cheery tune than what we thought it would be because the last time we were talking, there was a lot more promising news that looked pretty, not certain, but at that point I would have called it 50-50, which was an insane percentage to have.
It was way more than 50-50. All the top reporters were saying that the NHL wants to do this. This is likely happening. I was saying 80-20 at that point, the way McKenzie and the rest of them were talking.
So that's changed a little bit, and we're going to get into that as well as return to play conversation and draft profiles. But first, I want to talk about something we mentioned last episode, which is that there's currently a giveaway going on, a 3-tier giveaway going on to all patrons of the Winged Wheel podcast, sponsored by Everett. At Born to Dan Hart on Twitter, our good friend and sponsors of a lot of our giveaways. So Everett wants to help us in thanking all of the patrons who have been able to keep supporting us through hashtag these trying times TM. That's obviously a really great thing. It allows us to keep going with the show, get the equipment, and do what we need to do to bring you the show virtually, and continue putting out some content for you guys. So in order to thank you, we're doing a 3-tiered giveaway based on all patrons are automatically entered based on their subscription levels. That's how many entries we're giving you. The third prize is a $25 gift card to Vintage Detroit's web store. Love Vintage Detroit, great for customization. Second prize is a signed puck from a current Detroit Red Wing. And the top prize is a customized jersey of the winner's choice. So 3 fantastic prizes for our patrons here. So if you're not a patron and you have a few bucks you're willing to throw our way, it really helps us support our show. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. I told these guys, I was like, look, tell me what you want to do. I will be drinking and cooking until we're ready. I just need to know if I'm eating dinner or not. And we decided that we are, but then they both finished early. So I did all the drinking, but none of the eating. So if I mix up any words, it's Brad and Evan's fault. So thank you, Everett, for supporting that. So this episode, and next episode are the Patreon entries that will be entered. So thank you, Everett. And we will also kick in an additional prize of our own, but we have yet to decide that because I just decided that on the spot. And I'll ask these guys after what they care, what they want to enter. And Evan will say, I don't know. And Brad will say, whatever you think.
We'll give away Evan's cat.
No.
Yeah, hope you got lots of money.
Wait, his cat or his cat?
Sure.
Okay.
My answer stays the same.
The June draft. Quick recap for anyone who is just tuning in. So the NHL put forward a early June draft proposal, which entailed a few things, one of which included reverting to the old draft lottery methods. And for any of you who don't remember, the current draft lottery methods include 3 different winners, and anyone can move up any number of spots into draft positions 1, 2, and 3 in the first round. The old draft lottery methods were 1 winner, and you can only move up 4 spots. So Detroit would essentially move from an 18% chance of winning the draft, 18.5% chance of winning the draft lottery, which was lesser than Ottawa's cumulative 25% chance because they own San Jose's pick as well, to a 57% chance of winning first overall and first dibs at drafting Alexis Lafreniere, in addition to having at worst the second overall pick. It looked like the NHL was pretty much strong-arming the league into this under the pretense of there's a lot of different advantages. Revenue, you get to save money because you're not extending your scouts and amateur scouting team for any contracts that are expiring, and a myriad of other things that the NHL put forward, but the primary goal here was money. It wasn't, believe it or not, it wasn't actually to fix the draft for the Wings and the Senators. It was to get some revenue in. Now, since last episode, there was a Board of Governors meeting, I believe the next day. Didn't go well. By all accounts, there were at least a few teams who were pretty unhappy explicitly with the advantage this was giving Detroit and Ottawa.
God, I feel so bad for those other teams.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. I think we all agreed even before last episode, and we mentioned it during last episode, that the concept of a June draft for just about everything other than money was a bad idea if we take our Red Wings bias out of this.
Oh, you remove bias, yeah. Unfair,
yeah, if we move our bias, like, obviously we're upset this happened, but, well, it still might happen, but we're obviously upset that it looks like it's probably not going to happen now. And logically, from the NHL's fairness standpoint, yeah, of course you do it after the season, under any circumstance, and it will not be difficult to pull it off because the players were saying that they need 2 months of an off season roughly in order to properly have an off season. So if you're telling me you can't get a draft lottery, a draft, and a free agency done in 2 months, I'm not buying that for a second. They absolutely can. Is the NHL going to lose money that way? Yeah, probably a lot of it. Are they going to lose a lot of viewership? Yeah, probably a lot of it, because the NFL will be back at that point. I'll assume basketball will be on a similar timeline to the NHL, so that will take away. I mean, from a viewership growing the game standpoint, is terrible. And the NHL's ultimate focus to grow the game is viewership and money. So hence why they're pushing it so hard. But we can't be surprised there was this much pushback. It's probably going to end up as a status quo, same draft lottery, same odds, yada, yada, yada. I still hold my opinion that the current iteration of the draft lottery is just stupid and terrible and defeats the entire purpose of parity in the NHL, but I digress. But yeah, I can't say any of us are surprised. This was beneficial to two teams. It just so happened we're fans of one of those two teams. So what would make this even sweeter is if they did it after the draft lottery, or after the playoffs, and they did the draft lottery right after, and we still got first overall. I'm here for it. But there is one complication with this. Because one of the things that the NHL is pushing for hard, from the sounds of it, and I think every team agrees on this. This isn't just the league pushing it. Since it's looking more and more likely that they will not be able to finish the regular season, we're going to have an expanded playoffs, right? So I don't know if there's going to be 20 teams, 22, 24. I keep hearing 24 from the powers that know in the hockey world. Even if you do the draft lottery after, I mean, is it fair for a team to make the playoffs and then still win the draft lottery? If Montreal gets into the playoffs, even if they don't win a game in the playoffs, they still get to experience the playoffs, and then they could end up with Lafreniere. It's not a hill I would die on, but still, something doesn't feel, I don't know what's the word, right about that. So I think there's a chance we still see a modified draft lottery format. Maybe not quite so generous to Detroit and Ottawa, but I have a hard time at this point with all the angles coming at this, seeing that it is going to be status quo, which is entirely contrary to what I thought 2 weeks ago. I thought for sure it would absolutely just be status quo. But I can see a lot of teams out of a playoff spot kicking up a stink going, yeah, sure, the arenas are empty, but they're getting marketing, they're getting viewership, they're probably getting some kind of advertising dollars, and we get no benefit? I don't think so.
Yeah, we're going to get into your idea of a modified lottery here in a second. I think we're going to go around and kind of pitch some ideas, but there's a lot of there's a lot of discussion. Discussion's a word. There's a lot of talk about this on Twitter since the episode came out and before and after the governor's meeting. And you know what? There was a lot of gray area too. I know it's kind of a cop out, but everyone was kind of right in a different way. When we come at this from a fan's perspective, we're saying what Brad just said earlier, which is that, yes, this is a change of the rules last minute, and any team that comes forward and complains has a solid, objective, fair argument against it. Like the rules switched, and doesn't matter whether the rules are inherently fair or not right now. They can say this isn't what we agreed to coming into the season. This isn't the status quo that we prepared for, and it astronomically benefits two teams and not us. That's fair. In practice, is it fair? I mean, if you want my Red Wings fan answer, it's that everything that I rattled off or screamed at you last episode, which is that this draft format isn't fair, and the Red Wings have been boned every single draft, and like Canucks fans can attest to that too. Like, you move down 6 spots in 3 drafts, you stop giving a shit about fair. But the point still stands that, yeah, sure, the Red Wings benefited a lot, and it would have been nice to see the league strong-armed the rest of the teams into this, but those who did kick up the fuss did kick up the fuss. You wish they wouldn't, but here we are. In terms of, like, I saw a lot of discussion about did the Red Wings tank? And that's another conversation where I kind of... It's iffy for me, and I'm not sure exactly why it's relevant, because there's a team like the Red Wings every year, not in their performance. I think the Red Wings have been a historic level of bad this past season. 39 points with 12 games left is not a good place to be in. You're talking Colorado from a few years ago bad. And everyone's saying, well, Yzerman tanked. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Yzerman didn't actively try to make the playoffs. Yzerman didn't pull the Ken Holland moves, which is to mortgage futures and make bad long-term deals to try to move this team up a few spots. And I think Ken Holland did that for a lot of years until it actually wasn't feasible anymore. And I saw the argument put forward, which is that, well, if Yzerman tried to make the team the best he could and then still failed, then they deserve to win the lottery. And all I could think of was, no, like, you run out of room at some point. There's only so many moves you can make in the margins. Like, if talent that made you a playoff team was available in free agency, that means they're already gone. The Red Wings didn't have that capacity. They didn't have cap space until a year ago. Those players don't go to free agency anymore. They don't have the assets to trade for those players. Those players aren't the right age to trade for. They don't have the right price to trade for them. Like, what are they going to do? Trade for Mitch Marner right now and mortgage their next 5 years of first round picks? Like, it just doesn't exist. So I definitely see the argument that, Steve Yzerman didn't try to make this team better. But I don't think he tanked in the sense that, like, he sold every good piece they had to ensure last place. I think he barely sold any of their top pieces. Like, Larkin, Mantha, Bertuzzi all stayed on this team. Zadina's still on this team. Hronik's still on this team. What did he sell? Athanasiou and Green? Like, this team was washed because of years and years and years of mismanagement. And look, I will still stand by the fact that Ken Holland deserves to be in the Hall of Fame one day, and he deserves a statue in whatever arena the Red Wings are playing in one day. But his last 5 to 7 years of managing the Red Wings are the reason they're in this situation they're in now. And that's fine. No GM is perfect.
So if any team ever deserves the first overall pick more than any, and I don't care if you think I'm biased on this or not, it's the Red Wings.
Thank you. They
made the playoffs 25 years in a row. They actively avoided anything that resembles tanking for at least 25 years. They went for it in the 26th year too. They were just terrible because of the bad contracts and everything that Ryan mentioned. But before I even get into the conversation about tanking and did the Red Wings tank and give my take on that, since when is tanking no longer considered an acceptable thing to do? It's what every bad team has done since the draft lottery, in the salary cap era, since any sort of, I don't even want to trace back how far this goes, but it's Buffalo, Arizona. Toronto got Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and Mitch Marner out of this. Buffalo got Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel, Rasmus Dahlin. Like, Buffalo has their problems, but it works. Edmonton got Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl out of this. Nugent Hopkins, Taylor Hall. If you're bad, there is no debating. This is what you do. You don't have to burn it down a la, what was it, the 2014-15 Buffalo Sabres. That is excessive. That is what you don't want to do. But you don't go out and actively add pieces. You're not signing a Torrey Krug. You're not signing a Taylor Hall. But what did Yzerman do? So let's get into the how heavy did the Red Wings tank? Well, most of this team I'll say a lot of this team is comprised of players who were on the roster the last time they made the playoffs. Yes, they've declined, and anybody could see that coming except for Red Wings management at the time, but they have a good chunk of an air quotation playoff roster on this team. Steve Yzerman made 3 free agent signings on July 1st last year, and I'm usually anti-July 1st any signing. It's a bad idea. But he picked up Val Filppula, who is an upgrade at third line C.
Which is a sad statement, and we acknowledge.
Yes, it's not good, but it was an upgrade, and he ended up playing 2C. Patrick Nemeth came in as a top 4D. Out of all the signings, he probably actually is the only one who outperformed what we expect of him. He brought in Calvin Pickard to hopefully push the goalie situation. Didn't work. But here's the key, I'm going to call it the 2 key moves that you don't always do if you're going full nuclear on a tank. Steve Yzerman gave up futures. He traded a draft pick for Adam Ernie, and he gave up a half-decent prospect for Brendan Perlini. Yes, I get Ernie and Perlini aren't that old, but they're a hell of a lot older than the assets that they were given up for. So if you're going full nuclear, you don't do that. So were the Red Wings actively trying to be good this year? No, of course not, because it would have been in their worst interest to try and improve upon last season. Did they go nuclear tank? No, they didn't. They were that horrifically bad the honest way, which is depressing in its own right, but that was not intentional, and that was a long time coming. They didn't rush their prospects up. They played veterans. They admittedly had a lot of bad luck this year. Their PDO sucked. They had a ton of injuries coupled with a handful of players that just, for whatever reason, had dips. Everything about why the Red Wings were as bad as they were this year came about honestly. So if you are anti-tanking, sorry, you don't get to criticize the Red Wings. If you're pro-tanking, it doesn't matter then.
I have 2 main points about this. One, I was probably the captain of the Steve Yzerman return home GM committee before he came home, right? Every guest we had, I was obnoxious and berated them about whether they thought Yzerman was going to come home or if they were wrong. It was a whole thing. I have probably as much Steve Yzerman bias as you're going to find on anybody who comes onto a listen to podcast twice a week. If Yzerman came into the season and tried to, trade for David Legwand at the deadline and try to make the best team possible, I would have been the first to turn and say, no, he's doing a bad job. The way Yzerman moved forward was objectively the correct way to handle a team in this situation in the NHL. And the only better time to do it would have been 5 years sooner, and if your name was Ken Holland instead. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. And I think the people who have been listening to the show since day one have heard us say that. Secondly, and this isn't just conjecture, this is from talking to people in the know in the organization. I hate using the word sources because I feel like it's just tooting our own horn. But sources, like talking to them before the season, during the season, and now, every conversation we've had with them have said the same thing. Like, yes, this team has finally accepted what they are from ownership down, which means the Ilitches accept that they can no longer make these unacceptable pushes to the playoffs at the cost of their futures. But at the same time, this team has a brand new arena, in an economy that was struggling before and now in terms of ticket sales. They can't be losing by 5 every night. They have to lose by 1 or 2. And that's pretty much the balance Steve Yzerman was trying to strike. And that's, you can see that with the moves he made. Are, Brendan Perlini and Adam Ernie and Valtteri Filppula and Robbie Fabry as a collective barn burners? No, of course not. Are they complete, duds, dipshits? No, they're at worst warm bodies, at best Robbie Fabry. So you're trying to find this reasonable balance between going out there and putting a team that can put butts in seats every night, but at the same time not about to run away and squeeze you 3 points out of a wild card spot, and then all of a sudden you're drafting Jack Quinn instead of Alexi Lafreniere. And that's exactly the way Yzerman designed this team. And Brad mentioned there was kind of a perfect storm of things. One of them being a massively crappy roster that you could do literally nothing with because of the way that the contracts are designed. and then you got a 39-point Detroit Red Wings, and that's just the way it goes. So am I saying they didn't tank? No, it depends on your definition of tank. Did they sell everything ridiculously like the Sabres did however many years back? No. Did they try to win? Also no. Is that relevant to the whole draft lottery discussion? Hell no. Hell no. Try telling me the way the Red Wings handled their team this year was anything other than objectively the best way to handle this team if you're a GM. And I'll tell you, you're dead wrong, and I won't even give you an honest conversation. And I'm a sucker on Twitter. I will give the most belligerent people an honest conversation.
That's true.
This is why when I was going on my rant, I separated tanking from going nuclear, because those are two different things. Tanking is aiming for the bottom, which I won't even argue the Red Wings did, but they didn't go nuclear. And that matters if you're anti-tanking. That's all that matters if you're anti-tanking. But with the draft lottery, is it fair? No. Should it be fair? That's another conversation. And no, it shouldn't. If the Red Wings were the defending Stanley Cup champion right now, I would still argue that they should go with the old draft lottery format versus this one. This one is a travesty. How many teams have we seen jump up who just missed the playoffs to win a draft lottery when teams who finished first, second, third, fourth, last get slammed back? The Red Wings were 6th worst in the NHL one year and got bounced back 3 spots. How does that happen? That means 3 teams between 7 and 15 won the draft lottery. How is that helping? Now, what was the one example I had?
If they moved up 1 spot that year, you know who they would have had?
Middlestat.
Was it not Elias Pettersson?
No, Pettersson went 5th.
Yeah, and they were 6th.
So they
if
could
they
have
moved up 1 spot, they would have had Elias Pettersson.
Oh, yeah, from where they were. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's this whole thing, and apparently the Detroit is one of the few teams who actually had Pettersson number 1 on their board in that draft for whatever. If you're wondering, they might not have taken him. No, they would have. But yeah,
Hold on, I'm just going to punch the air for a little while.
Yeah. It's a superstar-driven league. So the one thing I was looking at, okay, and if you're sitting there and go, no, it's not, you need depth and yada, 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 here's my argument to you. Look at the Detroit Red Wings rosters for, I'll say, how many years did they make the playoffs after Lidstrom retired? 3? 2013, 14, 15? Yeah, 3 years. 16, 4 years. Look at those rosters. If you take Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg off those rosters and replace them with a good, let's say Dylan Larkin, I argue those teams are as bad, if not worse, than this current iteration. A team that took the Stanley Cup champions to Game 7 of the second round, had Damian Brunner and Joachim Andersen on the third line with a rookie in Gustav Nyquist, with Kyle Quincy and Brendan Smith logging big minutes on the blue line. What in the hell was functionally different from that team to this travesty? Zetterberg and Datsyuk. Yes, it's a
and Jimmy Howard standing on his head.
Didn't hurt. I would argue Bernier did that this year, though.
I'm just trying to put down the Howard haters. Give me a
Anyways,
chance, man.
I love Jimmy. He just needs to retire now. But no, honestly, it's those 2 guys, 2 superstars, changed that entire dynamic. They went from the worst team in the league to Game 7 of the second round of the playoffs. If you're wondering why I say the current draft lottery is not fair, that's why. Marco Rossi makes the Detroit Red Wings a better team. Lafreniere makes them a potential contender when they get good. Rossi will help them in the playoffs. Lafreniere will get them to the playoffs. Is one player like that good enough to win you a cup? No, that's when depth matters. But
you need your superstar, then you start filling out.
Exactly. You build around a superstar. And again, I love Mantha. I love Larkin. The Red Wings do not have a superstar right now. Zadina is not going to be that guy. Seider is not going to be that guy. Very, very, very good players. All first line players in all likelihood.
You want to know
Not-
a great case study in superstars that you need to win a cup? They're on the same team. Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves. Jonathan Taves, superstar in my mind? No, he's on the cusp. At
He
his
had a
peak,
couple
he's on
years.
the cusp. He had a couple of years where I think maybe he would have qualified, but over the average of his career, he's on the cusp. Patrick Kane? Absolutely. Patrick Kane puts that team over to their 3 cups or whatever it was.
Yeah. So let's trace back. Quick thought experiment. 2019 Blues superstar. Yeah, I'd argue a couple. Petrangelo, O'Reilly, Tarasenko. Not going to say they are or aren't, but you can make a case for any of them. 2018 Ovechkin, Backstrom, Carlson. 17-16 Malkin, Crosby. 15 was
It's hard. Pittsburgh or Chicago.
no, it wasn't Pittsburgh. It was Chicago. Kane, Taves. 2014 Kings, Kopitar, Doughty, Quick at the time. 13 Hawks, same thing. 12 Hawks. 2011 Bruins, Bergeron. I won't even include Marchand because he was a rookie that year. Tim Thomas stone on his head. Chara. 09 Crosby, Malkin. 08 Zetterberg, Datsuk. 07 Pronger, Getzlaff, Perry, Solani. 06 would be the last one. The last team I would argue won a cup without a superstar, and that was the Carolina Hurricanes. But Cam Ward in those playoffs played like a damn superstar. So
Penguins won in 15-16 as well as 16-17.
yeah, and 14-15 was the Hawks, right?
Yeah, I don't have that list in front of me, but still, no, your point
Yeah.
stands.
So anybody who says, "Oh no, yeah, we don't need first or second overall," no, you do. You absolutely do. That is the sad reality. Go back through the last 20 drafts. How many? And I'm not talking really good players. I'm talking superstars came outside of the top 2 or 3. That number is depressingly low. I'm not going to say there are none. There are some. There are always exceptions to the rule. Pasternak, Kucherov, etc. Barzal, if you want to include him. But they are the exception. Are you going to be that team that hits that, I'm just counting the first 3 rounds, that 1 in 90 every year? No, of course not. It's a horrible system. I hate it. So my whole point here is if you're going to preach to me about fairness and what the NHL is doing now, cool. Show me a better, fair draft lottery format first.
Yeah, very, like, if you're wondering why we went off on that tangent, it's this very quick summary of what Brad said. The league was about to give Detroit and Ottawa a very arbitrary benefit, when the draft lottery gives random-ass teams a very arbitrary benefit, like Chicago and Carolina and Philadelphia, teams that didn't need it. So you would be hard-pressed to find a Red Wings fan crying tears for those teams that lost their 2% chance at winning the draft lottery. Now...
And the one thing we can't lose perspective of in this whole stupid situation is why are we having this conversation is because it's in the middle of a global pandemic. Of course, nothing's going to be fair and normal right now. Do you know what's not fair? I don't get to leave my goddamn house for 2 months. Who cares about fair? Life's not fair. Accept it.
Bill Daly's comment on this was correct, which is that for anyone expecting status quo, there is going to be no status quo. You don't get normal. Nobody in the world right now gets normal. There is nobody on this planet, except for maybe people in like New Zealand right now. I can't remember what country has completely eradicated this. Nobody gets normal. Sure, you can argue that the NHL can find a different solution, and we're going to touch that in a second. But there is going to be no status quo. It's not going to go as we planned. We're not going to be able to play out all 82 games and then a full playoff and then a full lottery and then a full next season. I'm sorry, it's not happening. And if it does, I will give one random listener $100. I don't care. $100, which is 5 million Canadian, in case you were wondering. I was trying to buy jerseys today.
Podcast account.
No, it's certainly not.
We don't have the money for that, Ryan.
It's not happening that way. And yes, the argument is that, well, it doesn't have to go to this extreme, and that's fine. Removing bias from it, totally, man. I think you're an asshole for trying to take away nice things from Red Wings fans, but that's a whole different story. But there is going to be no status quo. Now, before we get into alternative solutions for the lottery to try and find a sweet spot here, another point that was brought up that is very valid and not as big of a point that was argued as the draft lottery benefiting Detroit and Ottawa or the letting the scouts early saving teams money, but it was a point of a contention against the early June draft, which is that there's a roster freeze right now, and that means you can't make trades to leverage cap space at the draft, which is a high time for trades, which hurts teams that have that cap space and hurts teams that need to find cap space. So, in case you haven't read between the lines here, the Red Wings are actually punished by this, which is why Steve Yzerman came out against, or was vocal against, this early June draft.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Again, with the understanding, nothing is normal. Is that going to be that big of a deal come, say we do the draft in October? Is that going to matter that much? Because by that point, I'd be surprised if the NHL hadn't worked out something with the teams that are strapped against the cap, because there was rumors going around about compliance buyouts, but apparently to alleviate that problem, but apparently a lot of owners are against that. Then there was the idea of an exceptional player cap. I don't know if it's like a one-time thing or a permanent thing where one player doesn't count against your cap. And I don't know.
It's a time when Mike Ilitch would snap his fingers and tell the league to do something, you know?
Yeah, and so I get what people are saying, and yeah, in theory, it couldn't happen in June. Well, not in theory, it definitely couldn't. You could always have those wink, wink, nudge, nudge trades. Detroit trades a conditional 7th to Tampa Bay for a first-round pick, and nobody knows why. And then there's a weird trade that comes down the pipe in November where we get Alex Killorn for future considerations. I mean, I get it, but we're still not going to get normal, because isn't there, like, let's say Tampa wins the cup. Okay. Do you think the NHLPA, make sure you're hearing me on that, the NHLPA would like a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are strapped against the cap, win the cup, and then have to start pawning off players a week later? There's no roster freeze at that point. No, they'll be unhappy of it. Point being, nothing's going to be fair. Everybody's going to get screwed here in some way, shape, or form. So they need to start working some kinks, and I don't care that there are no trades. There are no trades in a June draft? Okay. Shouldn't have put yourself over the cap. Tough. Deal with it. No different than a player getting hurt. Sometimes shitty things just happen, and you have to adapt. Because guess what? So here's the question I have to this, and I was kind of rambling and thought of this as I was talking. If it's just trades, why does it matter when that happens? Because I understand that the draft's a trade hub. The reason for that usually is because all the GMs are in the same room. Well, that's not happening no matter what this time around. So everything's going to be done by phone anyway. You're telling me if Julian Breezeball is really hard up for cap space, he can't call people in October? You can still make that. And yeah, it would suck for the team. It would suck a little bit for the team acquiring the dead cap and the pick to wait till next draft to do that. That's not ideal. But again, nothing is ideal right now. You're not finding a perfect solution. So why do we keep nitpicking on these little details that are unfair that still have workarounds? They're just not exactly what they were. Because that's all this is we're nitpicking on stuff that's close, but not quite.
It's three things. One, you just got one of them, is that teams are going to want to be dealing in more certain assets, which are draft picks that they're about to make like an hour or 2 hours or a day from now. A team obviously has a way better read on what their 4th round pick is going to be this year compared to next year. Two, I think July 1st free agency has a lot to do with it because of cap space, but that's almost a moot point because when does the season technically end and when does free agency technically start? Who knows? Jeff Blashill's contract ends 2 weeks after the season ends. When is that? December?
So here's, again, counter argument to that one. The NHLPA has already said they need 50 to 60 days of an offseason. So let's just say, simplicity, we're looking at a 2-month layover between when the Stanley Cup ends and when the training camp resumes. So We are usually about 3 weeks from cup finals to draft right now, about 3 days from draft to free agency. They could just as easily fire off the draft lottery during the playoffs, whether that's conference finals or finals, whatever, because those teams wouldn't be participating in the draft lottery anyway. You can keep the same offseason timeline in that 2-month window. So if teams are that hard up about it, you're going to get no sympathy from me, because you have the potentially, if it's that big a deal, you could have the same parameters. You're just doing it in October instead of June. I mean, it's hard for me to feel bad on that one. And if you're saying, oh, the players need a longer offseason or X, Y, and Z, yada, we've all just been off for, by the time this picks up, 3 months. We've had the offseason, and you're going to get another one.
We've been shouting over Evan this entire podcast, and I think he's given up. So, Evan, how about you chime in?
Where do I even begin? Is there any stone unturned?
Between Brad and I, no. But
I
you
think
can probably
they've been
say
turned
things
over
better.
twice, so we might be back at the start.
That's usually how it goes, yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking myself in circles there, trying to justify, because I don't care. And again, this is my grandiose point here. Obviously, I want them to do a June draft because that's most beneficial for the Red Wings. Taking my Red Wings bias out of it, I do not give a shit when they do this draft. If other than the benefit, I don't care about when they do the draft lottery, when they do the draft, how they do it. Don't care, because every solution is going to suck in about 100 ways. It's up to the league to figure out what way sucks the least. Yeah, we do it in June. We lose the draft. We lose trades. We also lose a ton of money for these teams to spend to raise the salary cap. Cool, you're up for cap space? Let's do the draft in June because we need the money. Oh, you want to make trades? All right, we'll lose the money, but go to October with it. Like, you're screwed no matter what. It's just in different ways. Now, again, I hate the draft lottery format, period. So, again, I'd like them to do what's most fair, and to me, that's something closer to the old system. But again, if I'm not a Red Wings fan, I don't fucking care. It's going to suck.
Before Brad says again, let's talk about one last thing here regarding the draft lottery, which is that, and this is something Pierre LeBrun mentioned, that the league has taken a second look at this now after the pretty vocal board of governors meeting, and saying that they're going to try to find a solution. So it's not like the early June draft is dead. By no means is it dead. It's not guaranteed at this point. Call it a coin toss, if you will. They're talking about a middle ground, and I'm going to put something forward to you guys, and I'm going to give you my justification, and I'm not going to completely remove my Red Wings bias here, but I'm going to try to think of something that I think falls within reason. And you tell me, as completely objective, neutral observers, whether I'm a complete asshole or I actually am onto something.
I hate it.
So old lottery rules meant that you could only move up 4 spots, which essentially meant that the top 5 teams were in on the lottery. Now, teams objected to that because they said it was too extreme and blah, blah, blah. Here's the deal. I don't think we're getting a rest of the regular season. I think the NHL has talked a lot about this 24-team playoff, and I think that's the solution that they're most leaning on right now, if they are even able to play out any games anytime soon. So, 24 teams in the playoffs, you eliminate those teams from being able to win. Now, what you can do, however, is give the other 7 teams, or the 31 teams in the league, a chance to win first overall. So same thing as the old lottery rules where one team wins, but you can move up as many as 6 spots instead of 4. So Detroit still end up, I think, with that system, you can only be jumped once, so they're still guaranteed top 2, and they have, instead of a 57% chance, I believe, like a 43% chance, if my napkin math is right here. But they can be jumped by as many as 6 teams below them. That is still a pretty generous system for them, but it still does preserve the notion that the 24-team playoff, none of those teams can win first overall and a shot at Alexis Lafreniere. Is that still too generous? Am I being too much of a homer here?
It's fine. It's very similar, damn near identical to what I had in my head. I didn't have a 6-spot jump. I had a 5-spot jump. My solution was if you're going to do it in June, everybody's in the draft lottery, all 31 teams. With the caveat, so there's two amendments I make. 5-spot maximum to jump. If you want to do 2 teams on this one too, sure, so be it. I'm fine with that. One's more fair, but if you want to do 2 winners, totally cool. But if you're doing the 24-team playoff, you are ramping the odds for everybody in the top 7 in the draft lottery. So Detroit's odds, Ottawa's odds, LA's odds, everybody's odds go up. Every team that's out of the playoffs, their odds are obviously minuscule, but they're in it. So they could jump up from, if you're 15th, where you have better odds than 31, you're jumping to 10. Again, if you wanted to do 2, so the worst Detroit could pick is 3, in theory, sure. I would deem that pretty fair. So then you are now looking at maxed odds for all the teams that aren't getting the benefit of the playoffs. You do a June draft. Everybody can't claim victim because they're all involved in this. I mean, obviously Detroit still has the benefit of the field, but you're ramping up the odds of the 6 teams behind them. So Detroit's odds, without the math in my head, would likely be well below 40. They'd probably be almost minuscule to win the draft lottery, but factoring in the field, they'd probably be around 40-ish%. So I would do something
that high, unless you're talking about like Tampa Bay and Boston get like 0.1% chance here.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like they 0.5%.
Well, then why would they care?
Fairness, everybody's in. You don't know if you're making the Cup Finals. Okay, fine. Well, we'll bump you up as if you got bounced in the second round. I mean, it's still intriguing for the playoff teams because, again, if I was a Tampa fan, we picked 31st and then got Columbus again, I'd be pissed. Of course I would be pissed. So, hey, you had your chance. It didn't happen. Tough shit. Nothing's perfect. Because, again, if I'm the league and taking my Red Wings bias out of this, I am pushing for the June draft like they are for one reason and one reason only. Money. All these owners want money. All these teams want an increased salary cap. You cannot pass up revenue-making opportunities because you smash the draft in October when the NBA is going to be right around you, when the NFL is going to be firing off. God knows the MLB might still be in playoffs. Your draft isn't getting any attention. Fire that draft off first or second week of June. No, everybody's watching you because nothing else is going on. I mean, I get it. It's unfair to do it in June, but my mind at this point, from a business standpoint, you have to. So include everybody in the lottery and just let the dice land as they go.
Evan, what did you say when I told you pre-episode that I said I was going to be asking you what your solution was?
Yep.
That's what you said? You said yep?
Oh, I said I don't care. I said all the crybabies for the other teams, I don't care how they feel.
I think your actual words were, wah. Everybody has something to complain. Yeah.
You know what? Resolve how they want to do the playoffs, and then the chips will fall as they lay. If they want to do 24 teams, make the playoffs, all right, you're in the playoffs. And those other teams that aren't in, do the draft lottery odds based on those teams. And then everyone else will fall out of the playoffs accordingly, and those will be where they draft. Like, everyone, I think that's the best way to appease everyone. Like, you get a shot to win the Stanley Cup, you make the playoffs, and then the teams that are well out of it, which the bottom 7 teams are, they get a chance at some of the top 3 picks. So I think that's the best option. I would have much preferred to have a 50% chance at Lafreniere, but if we got to play nice and everybody's got to get their trophy, let's do it this way.
Now, the projection looking forward is that the league was hoping to have some decision by Monday, if not Tuesday. Obviously, it's Thursday night as we're recording this. So with our luck, Friday morning, there will be an announcement. But in all reality, it's going to take until Friday sometime, if not Monday next week. So you might hear even another episode of the podcast before we have a solution on this. So the league is revisiting it, and Brad is raising his hand for the first time in his life.
They were saying on the 31 Thoughts podcast today that it's likely the decision's getting kicked to next week. Likely, not guaranteed, but they said it's likely kicked to next week.
So we record Sunday night, post Sunday night, Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. They announce something. We'll have to record an emergency podcast. If it's
we will have the time, because even though I'm back to work 8 hours a day, I don't have anything going on at night still. So
if they have, if the rules are like more or less status quo and it's not a huge change for Detroit, you'll have our podcast as usual. But if it's like a top 2 guaranteed pick, for sure we're recording an emergency podcast.
Yeah,
Evan's time.
Pants optional.
Yeah.
You guys are wearing pants?
You guys are getting paid? Okay, we're gonna move on to draft player profiles. And correct me if I am wrong. Today we have Tyson Forster as our NHL entry draft prospect profile.
Correct. The power play specialist from the Barrie Colts. Covering him today. This guy, at least based on my own rankings, is going to likely fall right around Detroit's pick at 32. And to make this ultra Detroit specific, he would be very high on my list of targets for Detroit at that pick, because again, you don't like to draft based on need, but he fills a huge need that the Red Wings have, which is the left half wall on the power play, because he's a right shot power play specialist who's got a arguably top 5 shot in this draft. I mean, all the kid does is score goals. He had more assists than goals, so his playmaking doesn't get the credit it deserves. But watch any Tyson Forster highlight reel from this season. There's not a lot of variety in how he scores his goals. He sets up in the offensive zone, finds a soft spot, tees up, and just buries it. I don't think at the next level he'll be much of a 5-on-5 impact player. He's not very quick. His speed is all right. Good hands, and like I already alluded to, better playmaking than he gets credit for, but it's definitely not the strength of his game, and it's definitely not what's going to make him his money at the next level, but it's good enough he'll get by. I do struggle to see him playing more than a third-line role in the NHL, but I could see him being lethal on the power play, especially with how the Red Wings are set up, where they can just parade out Zadina or Mantha on the right half wall. You can have Hronek and Forster on the left half wall, and overnight Detroit's power play changes. Again, not the most complete player out there, but what is it that we always preach on this podcast when talking outside of the first round?
Never wear pants.
Also, yes. Find the tools and then build around it. Forrester has that NHL level tool. He's got this shot. Again, no guarantee everything else comes around, but at that point in the draft, you sure as hell try.
So here's where I land on Forster, which is that everything that Brad said is correct. Like, obviously, power play specialist, incredible shot, good offensive talent with high hockey IQ. It's not like he's a one-trick pony that doesn't know what to do other than swing his stick when he's in the offensive zone. I think he's an underrated playmaker and can make a good pass in the offensive zone. And that, to me, leads into my biggest point with him, which is that he's raw. Tyson Forster is a high-risk, high-reward second-round pick in my mind. You have a guy who, at worst, can be a great positional need power play specialist, like Brad mentioned, right-hand shot on the left-hand wall, opposite Zadina, to complement Hronek on the left side and Mantha on the right side at the point. So there's your 4 guys, and you put Bertuzzi at front, and then bam, you have Larkin freed up on the second power play unit. I just put Tyson Forster on the first power play unit. Remind me to drink less before episodes. But
I mean, still, if he pans out as we hope he does, that's what he should be.
So he's a high risk, high reward guy. So if he pans out reasonably, you have a guy with decent hockey IQ who's good offensively, who can, slot in as a bottom 6 guy, but play well in your power play. Now you improve on his skating, which apparently is not, the performance isn't great for a player of his type, but he can be improved in terms of how he performs technically. His skating can technically be improved. you round out him as a player. He has all this raw potential. You give him some good development, and all of a sudden he's not just a power play guy. He produces at 5-on-5, and all of a sudden he's not only useful on that left wall, he uses that offensive hockey IQ to be dangerous in the zone completely. It's not completely insane to think that Tyson Foerster could be a home run swing in the second round. I'm not saying that, the best player in the draft, but if you're looking for a top 6 player who you might be able to find in the 40 to 60 range, Tyson Foerster screams that to me.
Yeah, he's easily a second round pick, just because of his shot alone. Skating leaves a lot to be desired. And that's a big question mark at the moving up in the levels. Like, if he can't keep up at the NHL level, it doesn't matter how good his shot is. The Red Wings are quite familiar with how that works out. I think a team would be happy drafting him in the second round, and patience will be a virtue with him. He's definitely looking like a third line winger in the NHL at best, maybe second line if all the stars align. But some of the goals he scored in the OHL this year will just make you jump out of your seat. So I don't know if I like him early 30s, but maybe somewhere later.
I had him 31 for those who weren't paying attention to my draft ranking. So technically, he's a first round pick for me, albeit just barely.
So for Red Wings fans looking for potential second round picks, Tyson Foerster, in my mind, would be one to feel pretty good about. Also seems like a guy who's probably going to jump into the first round.
And one thing too, I'm glad I haven't mentioned it, just to avoid scaring off Red Wings fans. He is not Martin Ferk. He is not Timo Pulkkinen. He's got warts in his game, but he's at this stage in his development a more well-rounded player than either of them were.
Yeah, he's got some solid defensive numbers as well. So he can play 200 feet.
Yeah, I never cared about Marty Ferk or Timo Pulkkinen until they were winding up for a shot. Tyson Foerster is a guy who can create a play as well. If the puck's not coming off his stick, he can still have a factor in that play, and that's the difference. And not to say a great shooter isn't a great asset. Yeah, of course, you have a guy who could just rip it. If you boil Alex Ovechkin down to just his shot, he's still an elite player in the NHL. But still, Foerster offers not only his shot, but other things in the most important aspect of the game, which is scoring goals. So a guy that I like, definitely high risk. Like, there's a chance a team spends a 34th overall pick on him and he turns out to be a dud. For sure, that's what high risk, high reward means. But I think if you have a good development system, you get a few strokes of luck, and then he just pans out in the right ways, and all of a sudden you have a guy where they're like, maybe you should have gone like 8th, 9th instead of 34th or 35th. Again, would I call it likely? No. Because if it was likely, he wouldn't be ranked in the second round. So also a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of when he's shown this performance. Early on in his junior career, he did not have this kind of output for Barrie.
He's had one hell of a year this year.
Yeah. It was the top prospects game that he really jumped into the spotlight, right?
Yeah, I was going to say he was top prospects
player of the
game
game
MVP.
or something.
Yeah, he had a couple goals that game. And for what it's worth, too, he wasn't on a particularly strong team in the OHL this year with Barrie. They were, I think, just a hair above 500, middle of the pack in a weak Eastern Conference. So, and he put up good numbers. I know we talked about scoring being up in the OHL this year, but I'm going to pull this up here. I'm pretty sure he was over 80 points, like total, which is really, really good. Yeah, he led Barrie in scoring. 36 goals, 44 assists, 80 points in 62 games. And 53 penalty minutes, so he's got some bite to him. But here's the stat if you want to know everything about Tyson Foerster. 225 shots on goal. Only one other player on the team had more than 140.
Yikes. He's the trigger man, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. That offense ran through him on the power play. Okay, anything for quick hits? Seattle's new team name is decided. It's the Seattle Murder Hornets, obviously.
Of course. It's got a better ring to it than the Seattle coronaviruses.
Brendan Leipsic better hopes that he never has a job in the NHL again, lest he gets his ass beat by Tanner Pearson.
It'll be a lot of people handing him his ass. But the depressing reality of that is if you weren't an NHL player that wasn't directly named or affected by him, you won't care that much, because as much as people don't want to admit it, that type of sick bro culture is still so prevalent in hockey. It's not a good time right now.
All right, and we will move to overtime. Again, I want to highlight two things. Of course, rdwoodworking.ca, who made us our gorgeous custom podcast table, which we can't look at right now because there's a pandemic. And also Everett at Born to Dan Hard on Twitter, who has created and sponsored this 3-tiered giveaway for all of our patrons who have supported us through these tough times. So thank you to everyone, and you are automatically entered in a competition to win a gift card, a signed puck, or a custom jersey of your choice. All right, midweek episode, which means this is a Patreon exclusive overtime. We're going to start with Greg Wyshynski is the name on the Patreon comment. Oh,
God.
We owe Rowan so much beer when we meet him in person. He says, well, hello there, my tank lovers. Thank you for having me on your show. Given my handful of tweets this week, managed to rile up most of your fan base. It must be tough when the harsh wind of reality blows your way. You can't expect to just come out and basically concede that you'll tank before the season starts. Actually do it and get handed a top 2 pick. No, fellas. It takes a deft touch to win the draft lottery twice, or Galaxy Brain one of them by planning which games to tank like my Devils cleverly did. See 9th April 2017. You'll remember the game right. Genius? Yes, I remember that game. You know what other game I remember? That's right, you dummies. The 1995 Stanley Cup Finals when y'all tanked that pretty hard. Glorious. Never mind that the Devils had only one more successful cup run since then, multiple first overall picks, and we are still garbage. None of that matters. The most troubling part is the reluctance to go back to the Christmas tree style red, green, and white jerseys. Thank you, Rowan. Thank you. The red and green Devils jerseys were prime. Jersey time. Rank the original 6 throwback jerseys from the 91-92 season. Obviously the barber pole is number 1. Anyways, stay tanked, but also stay fresh cheese bags.
Oh my God, I can barely remember some of these. I remember Chicago had some variation of the barber pole at that point too, which was pretty dope.
Yeah, Chicago's was cool. Boston's was the B, like the B with no spokes. Montreal's was virtually identical. The Rangers was a little bit different of lettering, not as nice in my mind. Who am I missing?
I can't even
here?
remember. I can't even picture the Rangers, the one you're talking about.
Toronto had the polygonal leaf, and they went back to the frilly leaf for that one, which is obviously more of what they have now. So who am I forgetting here? So I have Boston, Chicago, Detroit, Montreal, New York, and Toronto. It would be Detroit's barber pole, Chicago's barber pole, I suppose, just for being bold.
Yeah.
Boston's B, Toronto's frilly leaf, Montreal because it's just a nice jersey, and then New York's because the lettering was worse back then.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yakarutas, his longtime no comment / question. When thinking about draft success, how much do you take into account the draft position? Say you have the 5th pick and it doesn't pan out, but you got a top 6 winger in the 2nd round and the 2nd pair defenseman in the 3rd. Do you consider that a successful draft? Also, have you ever played Eastside Hockey Manager? I've played it way too much and really enjoy it.
I haven't, and yeah, you got to look at the draft as a whole. Now, that being said, my caveat to that would be is if you have the 5th overall pick, if you whiff on that, but you get a guy in the 2nd round who's pretty close to being worth a 5th overall pick, yeah, I consider that a successful draft. If you have 5th pick whiff, you pick a guy in the 2nd round who a really good 2nd round pick, but if you redrafted that draft 5 years down the line and you'd be like, yeah, I could see that guy going like 15 to 20, that's not a good draft. You blew it. Are you getting average value from where you picked? And most drafts, assuming you don't have extra picks, you get 1 to 2 NHLers out of. So then you look at the draft value chart. What should I expect from this pick? That's what you should hold it up against. So yeah, you beat the odds on one pick, but it didn't make up for what you whiffed on. It's a bad draft. Again, if you're picking 20 and 50 and the guy at 50 in a redraft goes 15th, yeah, great draft. You win, even if you whiff on 20.
Haig, who I believe is a new patron, so welcome to the Dub, says, lads, just become a patron. Only been listening since the March 1st episode. Love it. No question. Just wanted to say you lot are a beauty. Keep up the good work, especially you, Evan. Cheers, lads. Now let's get that first overall pick. Oh, freaking Evan, bringing in the dough. Thank you, Evan. And thank you, Haig. Joseph Delia says, let's get weird. Hi, Michael. Vsauce here. What if the draft took place every year before the playoffs? What if teams could sign a draftee right before the playoffs? Would playoff teams trade up to try to get the top tier of the draft for more depth on their run? Or would we see crazy trades like in the NBA? Let's get crazier. What if all this feedback from the draft rumors didn't change the league's mind and we were still guaranteed a top 2 pick? Remember the good old days when this was a thing? Thanks, guys. Also, LOL to jerkface Brendan Leipsic. Enjoy the KHL.
So I here's the catch-22. Do I think that teams would trade up to try and get a Lafreniere or to get a Matthews for a playoff run? Absolutely, they would. How many teams in a playoff position, though, have assets that they're going to give up for that player? Because they're not going to give up an asset off their roster. So, of course, that would defeat the purpose. So, out of all if you look at the top 16 teams in the NHL this year, do any of them have anything that would sway first overall from giving up Lafreniere? Because I can't think of any major prospects on any of those teams that would even... You could throw together a package of like 4 future firsts if you wanted. But again, like an offer sheet, do you want late first round picks for Lafreniere? No, I wouldn't take 25th overall 4 years in a row for Lafreniere. So I think that would be something that could happen, that teams would try to do, but logistically, I just don't see happening.
It would also drive the price up on those picks, so you'd see even less movement than you already do. Although I think it's a negligible amount of movement, so maybe that point is moot. Okay, let's move on here. Bye, Felicia says, after reading through Leipzig's comments, I thought of some of the funny things people have said about me. For instance, one of my best friends called me a cow. What are some funnier creative insults people have thrown your way? Thanks for always being awesome. I don't know.
I'm sure you've had some in your Twitter mentions recently.
Yeah. I don't know if I've had a lot of funnier creative ones. I was a brown kid playing hockey, so you got a lot of unoriginal, pretty like shitty
where's
ones.
Your turban? Duh.
Yeah, a lot of that. I got a lot of just like geographically and like inaccurate pejoratives, which like they would say it and I'd be like, that doesn't even make sense. But just on principle, like against racism, I'd have to hit them in the face. And so in a way I validated their race. I don't know. Funny comments about me. I don't know. I don't think hockey players are as good of shit talkers as people make them out to be. I wasn't a good one.
Frequency does not equal quality. Because that was my first thought when you said that. It's like, I'm pretty sure I've been chirped in almost every hockey game I've ever played. And I can't remember a single insult that stands out to me. So, yeah, probably been called the dickhead about 4,000 times. Was there anything that made me stop and double take and go, wow, that was really good? Nothing. Yeah, the subtle ones are the best one. I still remember because I'm not big now, but I was like comically small in minor hockey growing up. And there was a kid who was, I guess, angry with me, and he was at least a foot taller than me. At least it felt like he was a foot taller than me. Lined up to me at the draft, at the face-off, and just turned and looked at me and said, "What are you even doing here?"
Oh, that's rough.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, he played on the worst team in the league, so I didn't feel super down about it because I knew what was about to happen to his team. But still, that one was probably the most memorable one I've had.
You know, I actually remember one now, which is we played a preseason game, and like for teams who or guys who or people who are listening to this podcast who played hockey, you know, preseason is a shit show in terms of fitness. Like, doesn't matter how great a shape you're in. Once you get on the ice, if you were not on the ice for the last 6 weeks beforehand, you were going to be gassed. I was a fast player, so I would cheat a lot as a defenseman, and I would skate back and, you know, stop the rush most of the time, no problem. There was one kid who was really good, had good top speed, and I was having a harder time catching him. I could have caught him. I felt like I could have caught him, so I pushed that much harder. And it's happened to me like twice in my entire life where my legs just went to jelly, skated off, yacked, puked my guts out. And my coach went, "You're out of shape." I went, "Yep." Played that team in the playoffs. That guy was the best player on their team. And he tried some kind of dangle. I ended up hitting him, pinned him against the board. There's a whole scrum. And I said to him, I was like, something stupid, like, "Your dangle didn't work, buddy. You're like 0 points the last 3 games. He goes, "Didn't I make you puke once?" I was like, "Oh, God." You did. You actually did. Okay. Jake Nagy says, "What is your ideal all-time Red Wings starting lineup, goalie included, with the condition that you can only choose one player from each of tier of 10 jersey numbers?" Oh, goodness.
That sounds like a patron exclusive episode.
Oh, man. So we got to pick between Gordy and Nick because they're in that tier.
Hot take, Nick. Hot take, you have to take the second best defenseman of all time.
I mean, yeah, because in the teens, we're going to get Stevie, so we can, air quotations, replace Gordy. We can't replace Nick.
Stevie, Fedorov, and
Ted Lindsay.
Zetterberg. Ted Lindsay.
You could get Zetterberg, yeah. Nobody else in the 40s.
What number was Ted Lindsay?
7.
Are we taking Nick, though?
Of course we're taking Nick.
So we're not taking Ted Lindsay, then?
No, we're not. I said you can't take him. I thought that's who you were like. So
don't worry, Ryan. I'll send you the Sylvan Learning link.
So yeah, first line: Fedorov, Yzerman, Zetterberg. Really don't care which of those two you push to the wing. You've got Lidstrom on defense. So then taking Lidstrom and Yzerman just knocks out so many of our other defensemen.
We can't take Konstantinov.
Can't take him. Can't take Red Kelly. Can't even take Fetisov.
Brian Rafalski is there.
28, yeah. Cronwall at 55 is there.
Yeah.
Dominic
Hasek's fine.
Yeah, Hasek at 39. We could take him.
There you go.
But yeah, that defenseman, man. Cronwall or Rafalski? Oh, that's tough.
Rafalski, I think, just because he has a proven pedigree with Lidstrom.
Now, are we taking into account their entire tenure as the Wings, or just...
No, them as a player, I think.
Yeah, then you go Rafalski.
Cameron Swick says, "Any idea why Wisconsin doesn't have an NHL team? Given its location, you think Wisconsin had any major pro sports team would be hockey. It's because they suffocate us with the Packers, and so they don't deserve anything else good. Although, thank you for your nice cheese curds."
You get the Badgers, deal with it. And like, what would the Milwaukee hockey team be called?
The
Milwaukee Hockeys?
Cheeseheads.
I just call them the Milwaukee Hockeys. Fuck it.
Jake Steggles says, "Good afternoon, gents. Longtime patron, first-time commenter. No Red Wings question today, just a life one. I'm moving in with my girlfriend to an apartment in Grand Rapids with no outdoor space or garage, and I will be forced to keep my stinky hockey gear in the laundry room with all the other clothes that are supposed to be coming out clean. What's the best way to keep the smell at bay so my girlfriend doesn't chop her own nose off and also kill me? Thanks in advance, guys. You're my favorite podcast, and I look forward to every episode, constantly refreshing my podcast app." Yeah, that's really nice of you, Jake. Thank you for your support.
Any ventilation you can get and a crap ton of capped odor. No free ads, but it's just a spray you can buy at any sports store, and just generously douse your equipment in that after every use, and it actually works surprisingly well. But you're still going to need a fan or a vent or something in there to get the air circulating.
Cost-effective way is just to take hand sanitizer and dilute it with water. I put like 5 drops of hand sanitizer in a spray bottle with water. The smell's gone almost instantly. It's amazing.
That's really smart. My stupid idea was going to be just a lot of dryer sheets, but that makes way more sense.
Yeah, I've
Why
tried
do you
that.
smell like my mom's underwear?
Oh, wow. We're not going to visit that one. Matthew M. Rice says, fellas, I've been trying to teach my son the nuances of every position on the ice, defenseman, forward, center. I cannot seem to get through to him the differences between a wing/forward and a center. You've all played a lot more hockey than me, and I'd love to hear your layman description of the major differences between these positions. I know it sounds like a silly question, but I bet you guys could coach him up much better than me. Love your pod and the great material. Long-time listener. Thanks. All right.
Venn diagrams.
Yeah. Okay,
Use Venn diagrams.
So
I'm going to do this quick before the two forwards talk because I'm the defenseman. I'm going to just do it very fast. The centerman drives the play and has defensive responsibilities. If he's not below the hash marks when the play's in his own zone, he's not a centerman. He's a winger. All right, you guys take it away.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume this kid's too young to understand how F1, F2, F3 works, so we'll stick to the basics. I disagree with Ryan that centerman's necessarily the play driver. The centerman is the support man. Okay, wingers for the most part stay in their lane in the neutral zone and the defensive zone. They will stay on those sides of the ice. In the offensive zone, you get a cycle going, everything goes. What the center's job is the difference is he's the guy in the defensive zone who's probably going to have to go in the front of the net or into the corners to support his defenseman. So if there's two attackers in the corner, one of his defensemen, he's the guy that gets in there and support. If it's a one-on-one battle in the corner and there's one defenseman in front with two attackers, he goes to support there. If the third forward on the other team's floating somewhere in the offensive zone trying to find a soft spot, that's where the center's the support. Same thing goes in the offensive zone. It's just flipped. Where are your teammates outnumbered? You're the support guy. Get in there and help. The wingers can drive play. If they're good puck handlers, they're quick enough, you can absolutely do that. But they are not going to go completely across the ice to support a defenseman, to support the other winger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The centerman goes everywhere on the ice where he is needed. The wingers stay in their lane and are where they're supposed to be expected. So that's I forget how he phrased it, but that's how my coach always explained it to me. First year I played rep. The center goes where they're needed. The winger goes where they're expected because they're the outlet valve defensively and they're the trigger guys in the offensive zone more often than not.
There's also a different position on the ice called a Brad Crisco, which you actually don't have to skate more than 10 feet back from the opposing team's blue line, but you can skate as far towards the opposing team's goalie as you want.
I call myself a rover.
Okay. Evan Beckner says, gentlemen, I've returned. How are your sweet bippies doing? I've been listening to all this draft salt and I've come to a realization. I'm not against tanking. I actually think tanking on the GM level is the fastest way possible to bring a bad franchise back into relevance. The lottery does nothing but cheat the worst teams out of superstars. The fastest way to build a strong team in the cap era is to draft better players. Best way to draft better players is to draft at the front of the first round. Best way to get there is to suck. Best way to suck is to tank. But what about Edmonton and Buffalo? Inept front offices are going to stay bad no matter what. Their specific inability to succeed shouldn't punish teams that are competent. The lottery sucks and is overall bad for the league in the long run. Holy shit, we should pay Evan for that comment.
There you go.
Not you, Evan. Nick says the Red Wings have done everything right for nearly 3 decades. They were elite through 2 cores and only bottomed out once. They were weighed down by contracts that were handed out as they attempted to maintain their window of contention. All of their stars were retired and their best players are a young core of mid first and second round picks. The draft lottery is broken. It doesn't keep teams from tanking and it doesn't allow the draft to perform its primary function of allowing the bad teams to cycle back into contention. This is the perfect opportunity to change up the way the draft works. Some people may not like it, but I didn't like propping up half the league for 20 years. And I'll always believe the Wings would have minimum 2 more cups if they were in the Eastern Conference where they belonged all of those years when they were out West. Again, another comment, we should give money. Eric O says, don't you yada yada me, Ryan. If I were on the committee trying to figure out how to hold a draft lottery in the 2019-20 season and the playoffs were canceled, this would be my pitch. Cancel the lottery, go by reverse order of standings, but put the teams drafting in the 3 lottery positions into a risk-reward predicament. If your team is to draft 1, 2, or 3, the organization will have to wager their 2021 first-round pick. Then run the actual 15-team lottery as it was supposed to have run for those draft picks. If Detroit drafts first overall, but the Jets win the lottery, they will be rewarded Detroit's 2021 first-round pick. So in theory, Detroit would have to choose between A, drafting Lafreniere with an 18.5% chance of winning their pick back, or B, fourth overall with no chance of losing their 2021 pick. If they pass on number 1, then the next team in line is offered the same thing. If a team doesn't have a 2021 pick or have already given it up, they are passed over, rinse and repeat until you have teams 1, 2, and 3. I don't know about that.
As much as I'm arguing it's a superstar-driven league, I mean, you can't do what Edmonton did for so long and have 2 players and nothing else.
Everyone's talking about fairness and unfairness regarding this purpose draft, and I think it would be a way to satisfy all 15 teams outside of the playoffs. It wouldn't penalize a team like Detroit if they picked first, but also won their pick back, or win the 2/3 lottery and get the pick of whoever ended up drafting into those spots. It could encourage movement in the draft order, present a reason for all fans of teams 6 to 16 a reason to tune in and keep their fingers crossed. It could push tanking teams to try to expedite their rebuild or choose to take the safer and more patient route. I'm rambling. Would you go for it as a GM at the bottom, middle of the pack? And if it did go down this way, would you take Lafreniere and risk the 2021 pick, or draft fourth and make sure you can't lose it? Thanks, boys. And just a general rule, I value this draft more than the next one in terms of top end talent. I think anyone picks 1 to 6 have a chance of being the best player of the draft of the next 2 drafts in my mind.
Yeah, this year I would consider it. Because next year's draft's not looking super strong. 9 out of 10 times, though, I don't. I would just pick fourth, even though, God, this would be a good draft to pick fourth, though. I don't know. I'm torn. I am really torn.
If you're picking fourth this draft, you get one of Tim Stützle, Marco Rossi, Lucas Raymond. That's wild in my mind. That's 3 potential like average year second to first overall picks.
Arguably, you could make a case any of the top 5 in this draft should go first overall next year if the way it's shaping up.
Not to knock Aatu Ratti, but like this year is like there's a shit ton of high end talent this year. The ceilings, there's no ceilings. It's just the sky this year. Okay, my favorite comment comes from Selfish Pug Hog, which says, please define concise, because I made the foolish question to ask for concise comments, so bless you for that one. Stay inside cheese bags, a Fournier company says, hello fellas, I'm completely healthy now, but I did test positive for coronavirus antibodies. If you think you had it, get a blood test. If it's positive and you're healthy like me, then you can donate plasma for vaccine development and patient recovery. Very important. Well, that's incredible. So good for you, man. I'm happy to hear you're healthy.
How does one get tested? Because there's an outside chance I did have it early in the thing when I got sick for a few days there. It was all throat and chest, but well, I mean, it went away quick. So I don't think I had it, but
Evan, DM him your address. Brad, go to an address you're about to get in your DMs and cough on their door handle a few times.
This was 6 weeks ago. I doubt I'm contagious at this point.
He goes on to say, now for Greg Wyshynski, first he whined on Twitter about Detroit being unfairly handed a top 2 pick and is now backtracking his statements with this recent article and gaslighting the Wings fans who called him out. Now he's saying, I don't know why you're afraid to call it a tank job. Second, like you fellas have said, players don't actively tank. Management and coaching staffs do, but players play for pride in their next contracts and not to be waived and bought out from the current ones. The compete levels are insane. No wonder Drew Stafford was pissed when Wyshynski asked him about tanking when he was with the Sabres. Third, he is a New Jersey homer. He loves the Devils and has always been jealous that Detroit has 4 cups in that 11-year window to Jersey's 3. Fourth, looks like I'm moving out of my place and living rent-free in his head. We've been sparring on Twitter, and this Red Wings slam piece is his biggest piece of reactionary butthurt. Come on, Greg, if that's your real name. Anyways, tell anyone you see to stop sharing that stupid pandemic video Dr. Mikovits that YouTube keeps taking down. She's an anti-vax loon trying to profit off COVID-19 hysteria. Chris Osgood for Hall of Fame. Stay inside cheese bags. Yeah, the sparring with Wyshynski was pretty adamant this week. Honestly, and this isn't me just trying to like be a fence sitter here. I anything I tweeted out was before I saw Wyshynski's comments. I was on the fence about him. Like, yeah, did Detroit, like we talked about earlier, did Detroit tank? Depends on your definition. Do I think that means they don't deserve it? No, God, no. I think, just as much as New Jersey or Edmonton arbitrarily deserved it, I can't imagine why someone would be complaining about Detroit being given something. There's no functional difference. If you close your eyes and you open them in Detroit, the first pick, you wouldn't question it. So I don't see the issue now, but I'm biased. Anything else from you guys before we wrap up? And we will wrap up. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We will be back on Sunday. Hopefully no significant news has dropped before then, hopefully significant news has dropped Saturday night, so we have something to talk about. Without further ado, we'd like to thank all of our listeners, our name level Patreon supporters, the septic tank of that bitch Carol Baskins, Jake Kiefer, Bye Felicia, Dead Panda Society, Brad Smith, Andrew Bohan, Scott Martin, Kayla Thompson, Jacob Turner, Matt McKay, Brendan M., Matthew M. Rice, Luke Johnson, Ryan Lewis, Langabir, Clayton Van Dyken, Kaylin Wood, Hassam Al-Qassem, Arjun Shankar, Charlie Elkins, Hannah Lee, Josh Rosnowski, new name level sponsors, thank you so much, Alex Ott, Chris Frank, Connor Layton and Danny Jr., Matthew Keeler, Craig Kibble, Simon Anderson, Antonio Gracias, John Evans, Kay Waz, and Stan Olson. Thank you all so much. We love you. We will be back soon. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.